So on behalf of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, I want to welcome you all here today for, I think, what will be a very interesting panel discussion on fighting hate and extremism. I'm Henry Fernandez. I'm a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. I'm joined by a tremendous group of panelists who I'll introduce in a second. I do want to say basically just a couple words about the format that we'll be using. We're going to start by having a panel discussion with me asking a few questions of each of the panelists. And then we're going to try to leave at least 20 minutes at the end of the conversation for those of you who are here in the audience that may have questions that you'd like to direct to any member of the panel or all members of the panel. And the way we'll do that, and I'll remind you of this at the end, is I'll just call on people, so raise your hand. I'll try to get a list going, and then we'll go forward. I also want to thank my colleagues at the Center for American Progress Action Fund, particularly on the immigration team, and on Ann Fahn, who's heads up our anti-hate work here at the Center for American Progress and the Center for American Progress Action Fund. So our panelists today, from my left, are Mark Potok, Ben Armbruster, Amardeep Singh, and Daryl Johnson. And I'm just going to take a couple minutes and tell you who they are, and you get a sense of their expertise in this area. So Mark is a senior fellow at the Southern Poverty Law Center. He's one of the country's leading experts on extremism and is the editor-in-chief of the SPLC's award-winning quarterly journal and blog. He's a graduate of the University of Chicago and has appeared on numerous television news programs and testified before the U.S. Senate and the United Nations High Commission on Human Rights. Before joining SPLC, he was an award-winning journalist at USA Today, the Dallas Times-Herald, and the Miami Herald. While at USA Today, he covered the 1993 Waco siege, the rise of militias, the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, and the trial of Timothy McVeigh. Amardeep Singh is the director of programs at the Sikh Coalition. Amardeep Singh is the director of programs at the Sikh Coalition, where he oversees advocacy, litigation, and community organizing projects. He's worked with the Department of Homeland Security to formulate guidelines governing the searches of Sikh passengers at U.S. airports, and he's represented the Sikh community in meetings with the United States Attorney General, Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, the Secretary of Transportation, and the chair of the EEOC. He's been quoted extensively at CNN, New York Times, Washington Post, and the day after the shooting, mass shooting at the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, Amardeep was sent by the coalition to support families there. I skipped Ben, but Ben Armbruster is here with us at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. He is the national security editor for thinkprogress.org. He's held similar positions in research at Media Matters for America, the Henry Stimson Center, and the Verification Research Training and Information Center in London. And finally, to my far left is Daryl Johnson, the head of DT Analytics, a firm which provides analysis and expertise on domestic extremist activity within the United States, and he's the author of the recent book, Right-Wing Resurgence: How a Domestic Terrorism Threat is Being Ignored. From 2004 to 2010, Daryl was the senior domestic terrorism analyst at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security Office of Intelligence and Analysis. While there, he wrote and led teams which wrote intelligence reports and briefed congressional staff, local, state, and federal law enforcement, colleges and universities, and other organizations. From 1999 to 2004, he was a subject matter expert on violent anti-government groups at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and before that he worked as a civilian domestic counterterrorism analyst for the U.S. Army. All right, so why did we at CAP Action Fund think that it made sense to bring you all together in this impressive group of experts together to talk about these issues today. From the murder of a 9-year-old Brazenia Flores and her father at the hands of Minutemen a couple of years ago, to the mass killing of 6 members of the Sikh temple in Oak Creek, Wisconsin, we've actually seen a dramatic number of murders and injuries resulting from violence attributable to right-wing extremists. This violence has targeted and killed or wounded religious minorities, people of color, law enforcement, and other government officials. We think there's an important role for the federal government to play, and we want to hear from these folks today about what that might be in attempting to address violent right-wing extremism. In 2009, DHS issued a prescient report meant to inform local, state, and federal law enforcement about the threat from violent right-wing extremism. That threat, they believed, was going to increase, or was increasing already, due to the economic downturn and the election of the first African-American president. The report was immediately attacked by a number of conservative media groups and elected officials. And as a result, there is no longer such a unit operating at the Department of Homeland Security. So we wanted to talk about what is needed to address violent right-wing extremism, and what role is appropriate for the federal government to be playing. So what I'm going to do